It's a Mockingbird Bird Bite, a mini lesson in cognitive design for at-risk learners. The 8 strategies of master educators. So let's look at this collection of design and delivery strategies that capture, sustain, and manage attention according to the principles of cognition. So the very first strategy is the sprint strategy. And what this is that we divide lessons into short 15 to 25 minute mini lessons. So if this is the length of a lesson, instead of having one big long lesson, let's break those lessons down into mini lessons. This helps learners manage attention and also helps reduce the cognitive load. Let's look at strategy number 2. Strategy number 2 is sprint variation. Sprint variation means that we vary the content or the activity of the sprints within a sprint sequence to avoid repetition and oversaturation and boredom. What that looks like visually is that if this is a course length, and here's our natural attention span about every 15 to 20 minutes, and we break our lessons into short mini sprints, and then we vary those mini sprints so that we don't do 2 writing activities back to back or too many math practice sessions back to back, it will increase attention, help us reduce cognitive load, and helps that learner manage curiosity and learner attention investment. So divide lessons into mini sprints and then make sure that we vary those sprints for variety to decrease boredom. The third is multi-sensory cues. Now, sensory cues are those signals or cues that we use to signal information quickly. It helps the mind prioritize and capture important information and work in memory. I like to use 3 cues and use them simultaneously: a visual cue, an auditory cue, and a physical cue. So I may give learners a picture of something and then have them do a callback and then put it on a physical mnemonic or a gesture. Now, it's important with adult learners that we explain the why behind the sensory cues, that it helps us encode information in memory and then pull that information back up more concisely. This is what it kind of looks like in the brain. There's an expression in neuroscience that says neurons that fire together wire together. And what that means is that if we encode this information at the same time, meaning that I use the image and the callback and the physical gesture all at the same time when I cue that information becomes wired together in memory. So that then when we go to recall that information, I only have to use one of those triggers and the entire memory comes up. This increases our chance of both encoding and recall when we use multisensory cues. Here's some of the examples of the multisensory cues that we use in an online context. You'll notice that you'll see these at the bottom of our slides. Those are multisensory cues. It's queuing up that information, hoping to tag one of these pathways so that the entire memory will come up. It's a very effective strategy for helping memory. Our fourth strategy is flash cues. Now, flash cues, or flash reviews rather, is when we conduct periodic reviews with the sensory cues to help learners process, reflect, and rehearse information. What a flash review does is it pulls that information up and allows us to review it. That helps reduce the cognitive load and also increases confidence as learners practice information about every 15 to 20 minutes. I encourage you to put in flash reviews at the end of all of your content sprints. Again, this helps us remember information, helps us as educators check learners' information that they have, that they're working on storing in memory, and helps learners with their confidence as periodically they stop, they review information, helps them organize it and tag it into memory more effectively as well. Now, let's look at number 5. Number 5 is state changes. It's physical, mental, and emotional state changes. We want to change the mental, emotional, and physical state of learners about every 15 to 20 minutes. Think about how that attention cycle works. About every 15 to minutes, change the emotional, physical, or mental state. And the easiest and the best state change is the one that we often underutilize, which is a physical state change. Play some music, have learners stand up, have learners change positions. Those are state changes. Here's some of the examples of state changes that I've used at the end of the sprints in Mockingbird's online lessons. Let's look at number 6. Number 6 is social interaction and variation. This simply means to mix it up with groups. Have learners collaboratively reflect and rehearse and articulate complex information in groups. In a live classroom, this is as simple as this. Turn to your neighbor and discuss and have them repeat information or discuss information. In an online environment, I may break them into discussion groups on Zoom, or I may unmute two learners and have them speak to each other. There's learners who can text or chat each other. There's different ways to increase social interaction and variation. I use the chat box as the biggest vehicle for using social interaction and variation. Also, don't forget that wheel of names. I often put learners' names on a wheel and then spin the wheel, and the names that come up are the ones that need to respond or to do whatever the instructional request is next. Always make sure you manage risk when you call learners out by name, though. Strategy number 7 is sequence and chunking. And what this means is to organize information in small sequential steps so complex information is easily digested. What that does in the brain is something that looks like this as opposed to this. Now there's lots of chunking examples and sequence examples that Mockingbird uses in its work. Here's our example of an agenda. Notice that I break it down into 3. There's 3 sprints today, if you recall that from our presentation earlier. There's using graphic organizers. I always use graphic organizers and then put the information with numbers on it. That makes it easy for me to come up with 1,000 different ways in which we can interact by using those numbers as signals to my learners. Also, the laws of learning are an example of chunking. This takes complex information and reduces it down to imagery so that we can have small chunks of research as opposed to looking at long passages of what researchers say. Those are just some examples of chunking. And then here's the last one, and perhaps my favorite one, which is that learners need time to reflect and articulate. This is self-reflection and articulation. Engage learners in periodic self-reflection and articulation to help learners process, rehearse, and reflect upon complex information. There's an expression in Mockingbird that sounds like this: if you can't articulate information in your own words, then you don't own the information. That means that if you can't repeat it in your own language, then you probably don't understand it well enough. Remember this: we talk too much. The more times that learners spend constructing knowledge and information, the better they will be in their ability to remember and recall the information. Those are the 8 strategies of master educators. It takes both planning, design, and development, and you can also use those strategies impromptu in any learning session. The goal is to become habitual in our use of these strategies to really become effective. Let me review them really quickly. 1 is sprint, reducing information down to mini lessons. 2 is sprint variation, making sure that those sprints are varied in content to decrease boredom. 3 is multisensory cues. 4 is flash review. 5 is state changes. 6 is social interaction and variation. 7 is chunking and sequencing. And 8 is self-reflection and articulation. Super simple strategies that take a lifetime to master.